Today I'd like to refute the claim that the Mexican drug cartel is a bigger problem to the U.S. than ISIS. My opponent begins by stating that because of Mexico's proximity to the U.S. and the fact that ISIS is overseas, it presents a bigger problem to the U.S. But I'd like to show you how it's a more complex issue than simple proximity. They go on to say that, to date, the Mexican drug cartels have killed more people than ISIS has. And while that's a true statement, it doesn't describe the entire scope of what ISIS means to the U.S. And finally, they cite that the drug cartels are the main suppliers of controlled substance in the United States. However, a lot of the statistics are difficult to understand and often misinterpreted. But let's begin with the first concept about proximity. I think it's beneficial to take a look at what we're talking about. Because of issues like illegal immigration, the Mexican-American border is heavily controlled, and the United States Customs and Border Protection tells us that they have over 20,000 men and women patrolling the borders on everything from horses, trucks, cars, and boats to prevent, in their words, terrorists and terrorist weapons, including weapons of mass destruction, from entering the United States. In addition to this, with the case with ISIS, a lot of the times, getting into the country isn't even their main problem. The FBI issued a warning because ISIS was targeting military families, and they issued a statement saying, overseas-based individuals are looking for like-minded individuals in the U.S. to carry out their attacks. So it's not even always the case that they're trying to come here. They're looking for people that are already here to carry out their attacks. And it sounds like an outlandish claim at first, but it's really not all uncommon. There are scores of stories of people posting or pushing ISIS propaganda videos on social media. And actually recently in Ohio, a man was arrested in conjunction with an ISIS plot, which is a really important point I'd like to refer to again. And that brings me to the second point, that to date, the Mexican drug cartels have killed more Americans than ISIS has. That's a true statement. They have committed more acts of international execution, but then that doesn't describe everything ISIS is out to do. When ISIS attacks the United States, they're out to harm more than just a handful of individuals. In this sense, they're going, the man that was arrested in Ohio, he was arrested in a plot to detonate pipe bombs in Washington, D.C. to kill a prominent United States official. ISIS plots are plots that have the potential to cripple the nation if they're successfully carried out, and that's going to harm much more than just a handful of people. And perhaps what I found here is we have to look at exactly what the U.S. is doing to combat these, and this is why ISIS seems as such a little threat, because we're doing so much to counteract them already. For the U.S. border, we send people out on foot to control it, but for ISIS, we have foreign troops fighting them. We recently, just last year, sent 1,500 additional troops. And actually, just last week, we hit the 1,000th airstrike on ISIS. Now, perhaps if we launched 1,000 airstrikes on the Mexican drug cartel, it would not be such a problem. And this brings me to the last point, that the Mexican drug cartel supplies a majority of the controlled substance in the United States. The exact figures were 90% of the cocaine and 80% of the methamphetamines in the United States. But these statistics, what exactly do they mean? The National Institute of Drug Abuse tells us that cocaine accounts for only about 7% of the controlled substances in the United States, and methamphetamines is less than 3%. The two most commonly abused drugs, as a matter of fact, are marijuana, of course, and prescription drugs. And the final point I would like to make is that the harm caused by these drugs are, in large part, just a secondary effect of the drug dealers, because it is entirely by free will of choice that these people choose to abuse these drugs. Given the new evidence, I hope you can agree with me in seeing that ISIS is the true threat to the United States when compared to the Mexican drug cartel. Thank you.
All right, well, I like the way you start off with kind of a general counterclaim and an identification of why the advocate's position seems reasonable given the arguments they made, and that's the proximity issue. And then you're going to basically challenge the notion that the proximity issue is a key idea. I think that that's an okay strategy to have. I do think, however, that you need to focus a little bit more on how the contrast ends up proving the position that you're taking. The closest you get to that is in the section where you talk about the plots that are being hatched here and the way they would be carried out and what they would do to the United States. So, for instance, even though ISIS is not responsible for the 9/11 attacks, the notion that they are planning attacks like that, they've made threats equal to what Al-Qaeda's tried to attempt, and that they want to control a large section of the Middle East and what their ultimate goals are. I think that that's kind of the way you need to build that argument a little bit more and say, we're talking about something that is potentially earth-shattering, as opposed to, look, cartels, bad people, definitely, crimes, bad people, that sort of stuff. I don't know anything about, I don't want to say don't know anything, but the vast majority of people that have been killed by the cartels are fellow drug dealers. Yeah. There's a vast difference between those kinds of things. Yeah, sometimes there are innocents in the crossfire, that sort of thing. The drug dealers aren't targeting their market. ISIS is targeting the whole market, that kind of thing. And it seems like that's the argument that you have there, but you need to make it a little bit more effectively. I think you get sidetracked on this issue about the controlled substances, why that matters. If there's an argument about how significant that is, I don't know. You mentioned at the end that marijuana is the most involved drug. And I'm going, okay, and where does that all come from? The idea that the cartels don't have anything to do with that, I think, is a little bit iffy. There's some problems there, too. So I think you're finding some places to press, but you're not pressing very hard in the one place that you need to do the most on, and then you get diverted on a couple of other issues. All right, thank you.